So I might have made a mistake. I let Instagram decide my wife's Valentine's Day gift, and not like vote on the color or something safe. They controlled the actual build. They picked the exact length of the tabletop, they limited how many types of joinery I'm allowed to use, and they decided whether or not it even gets a drawer. I had zero control, and I only have 2 weeks to build it. And the worst part is, I have to keep this a secret from her until Valentine's Day. Now this all started because a few months ago, when I finished building our coffee table for the living room, she was so excited. And after seeing it, she literally said,
"Now you have to build me a side table."
A side table? They're never happy.
And at that point, I laughed, and then I realized she wasn't joking. So this is it. 2 weeks, zero design control, and I have to somehow turn whatever Instagram voted for into something she'll actually love. Let's see what they made me build.
We just put the Instagram stories online. Everybody is starting to vote now. Poll number 1 is going to be the tabletop length. It'll either be 24, 26, or 28 inches. Poll number 2 is going to be how many different types of joinery we can use, and that's either going to be 1, 2, or 3 different types, and that's screws, pocket holes, lap joints, dovetails, that kind of stuff. And poll number 3, having just a simple yes or no option, is going to relate to either having a drawer or not having a drawer. Personally, I'm a little bit biased on this one because I want some more storage in there, so fingers crossed that you guys also agree and say yes that we need a drawer on this. But with the polls live, all we have to do now is sit and wait for the answers to come in, and we will see tomorrow what you guys decide this table is gonna look like. Alright, it has been 24 hours and we have our poll results here. On the first poll, with 50% of the answers saying 28 inches for the tabletop length. Poll number 2, which is how many different types of joinery am I allowed to use, came in with 42% of the votes for number 2, which means I get to use 2 different types of joinery. Now, I'm making a rule right now that glue on its own does not count as a joinery option because glue is kind of like, you gotta use glue, come on. And then poll number 3, which is should this have a drawer or not, 75% of you guys voted yes. So thank God we're getting a drawer and we're getting extra storage on this. So now that we have our answers, we can head out to the shop and start making these tables. Behind me over here, I have all of the wood for these projects. I have enough for both tables, coming in at under $100 so far. And you guys know I love a cheap project, so if we can keep this entire project under $100 for 2 tables, I'm gonna be pretty stoked. Now that being said, we gotta measure everything up and start cutting our wood.
So I think the cool part about starting a project like this is it always just starts the same way, just rough wood. It doesn't matter how complicated the idea is or what Instagram has decided at this point, it's still just boards that aren't flat yet. And actually, some of this wood has kind of a backstory. See, a while back, I did a landscaping project where I ripped a bunch of old wood off the front of my house, and I ended up with a bunch of extra material that I could use however I wanted. Instead of just letting it sit outside and rot further, I milled it down, and that's what eventually turned into our coffee table. And that coffee table was basically free. It was wood that was just sitting there. But somehow it became my wife's favorite thing in our living room. And when I brought it inside, she absolutely loved it to the point that she said she wanted me to make her more tables for the room. And again, I laughed at the time, but she was totally not joking. And the thing is, she really hates the side tables that we have right now. They're too small, they wobble a little bit, they're old, they're metal, they don't match anything that we own, and they're just there. It's the same reason that I built the coffee table in the first place. I wanted something solid, something that felt like it actually belonged in the room with the theme that we were envisioning. And so this isn't really a random project, it's kind of like finishing the set. And I do like that some of this wood is coming from the same place as the coffee table, same house, same material, just evolving into the next piece. But this time, I don't fully control what it becomes, which is slightly terrifying because once I start cutting the wood, I am locked into whatever Instagram voted for. So right now, this part matters a lot, and thankfully, I've just gotten a bunch of new tools to help me with this, and I'm really putting them to work here with my joiner and planer to make this thing awesome. Because once I move past this stage, there's no more blaming the wood, it's just going to be my fault. These reclaimed boards were no joke. They started out right around 3 inches thick, and when I ran them through the table saw, it was definitely working for it. You could hear the saw running slower. And that's when I started second guessing what this wood actually is. I originally thought it was pine, but it was cutting more like oak, just denser and heavier. It really didn't want to go through here, which honestly, I don't hate. Harder wood usually means a more durable final piece, but I didn't know it yet. Having a different type of wood was absolutely going to affect how we stain it down the line.
Well, we got all of our lumber milled to the sizes that we need, and now we're actually already ready for assembly. But you know what the coolest part about a project like this, where you have to rip really big pieces into smaller pieces, is you are left with massive stacks of scrap wood. And as an avid scrap wood piece collector, this is like the best day ever for me. These are like milled 1-inch pine boards that I definitely will be able to use on a future project. So they're staying somewhere.
So this is kind of a big moment for me. I've never actually done a full tabletop glue up before. Like, I've glued boards together, but not something that's supposed to be this clean and seamless. And honestly, the only reason I can even attempt it now is because I finally have a jointer and a planer. Before that, there is no way I would have ever trusted edges enough to get tight seams. But now, everything is flat, everything is square, and for once, I'm not fighting warped lumber the entire time. Which also makes this more nerve-wracking, because once you spread the glue, you are committed. There's no "I'll fix it later." You've got a few minutes maybe to line everything up, get your clamps on, and make sure nothing shifts. And then you just kind of hope you milled everything correctly. I probably dry fit this like 5 or 6 times before I actually put glue on it. But once it's clamped up, it's kind of a cool moment. It stops looking like a pile of boards and actually starts looking like a big tabletop. And this is the first time in the build where I am doing something I've never done before, and it always stresses me out.
Alright, it's the next day, and our glue ups are done gluing up. I'm very excited. That seems to have come out really well. A light sanding on this, and we're going to be off to the races on this tabletop. Heck yeah! Alright, let's get the second one. Nice, and again, this one looks really, really good. We can use either side of this for the actual tabletop. I think this is going to be the top side of this one. That looks really, really nice.
Now that I knew that the tabletops came out nearly perfect, it was time to cut them down to their final length of 28 inches, just like Instagram told us. And now that dimension is officially locked in. No changing it now, even if I wanted to. Then I ran a round over along the edges with my router, nothing intense, but just enough to soften it up so it doesn't feel sharp or bulky. That little detail makes it feel very finished, and it's crazy how something that small can change the whole vibe of a piece of furniture. But here's my problem now. There are officially 12 days until Valentine's Day. 12. And I have tabletops. That's really it. I have tabletops. I still have to build the bases. I still have to deal with the joinery restrictions that have been voted on. I still have sanding, finishing, dry time, all of it. And Alexis still has no idea that this is even happening. She probably thinks I'm out here in the shop just thinking about another project instead of building one like I normally do. But this one has a hard deadline, and I'm starting to feel that clock a little bit. So the tops are done, they're shaped, they exist. Now I just have to build everything else that actually holds them up. So this is the point where the first real joinery decision comes into play. Pocket holes. This is officially joinery choice number 1. And I needed something that was going to be strong, repeatable, and fast. Because at this point, I am very aware that I don't have unlimited time to overcomplicate things. So I drilled what felt like a million pocket holes. There's something kind of mindless about it. Drill, reset, drill again. But once you start assembling everything, it comes together very fast with this method. And that's a nice feeling, especially after the tabletop glue up, which felt delicate and slow. This part feels a little bit more comfortable and more rehearsed because I've done it about a million times. The legs and sides went together fast, and once those were squared up and locked in, it finally started looking like an actual table base instead of just parts on a bench.
So we've got our basic table frame set up here, but something that I need to add on the inside of this before we can actually connect everything together is an internal bracing system that will hold our drawer in place. See, these braces out here are too far out from the center to actually be used as braces for the drawer slides. So we need a little extra spacer piece, and I'm actually gonna use one of these cutoffs to brace in the center here between these two legs and push the surface out a little bit so we have a good spot to mount our drawer slides. Then we also need a brace that will go between these two legs here and keep the table from wanting to wiggle out and back like this. But it's also gonna have to sit behind the drawer face, so when the drawer closes, it can still flush up at least a 1/2 inch reveal, which is what we've got on all of these other pieces, and kind of give the illusion of a hidden drawer. It's not exactly supposed to be hidden. We're gonna know that the drawer is there, but I also want it to be integrated really, really well with the rest of the table. So we're going a little bit excessive here.
Since Instagram voted yes on the drawer, I needed an internal structure to support the hardware. And I didn't want to go buy more wood for something that no one will ever see, so I used all of the cutoffs from the original milling, all of the pieces that would normally just pile up in the corner of the shop that I swore I would use on a later project, I am now using on this project, which feels kind of fitting. So I built out the internal bracing system, basically a hidden skeleton inside of the table just to support the drawer slides and keep everything square. And once everything was assembled, I got a good look at the whole thing, and something felt off. Everything was perfectly square, like perfectly 90 degrees, crisp corners, super clean, which is ironic because I spent a lot of time making them that way, but they looked wrong. It was too boxy, it looked manufactured like IKEA furniture, and that's really not the vibe of the coffee table or the living room. I wanted something that felt a little bit more organic, like carved wood. So I did the thing that made no logical sense at this point. I grabbed my grinder and started carving the outside corners of each leg, which if you think about it is slightly ridiculous because I just worked really, really hard to get those edges perfectly square, but the second I knocked that sharp corner down and gave it that carved look, it clicked. It stopped looking like basic furniture and started looking exactly how I wanted it to. So yeah, maybe I wasted time making them perfect just to reshape them, but sometimes you have to build it wrong first to see what it's supposed to be. And now, it finally feels like the tables have a little personality to them. At this point, I still had to build the drawer boxes themselves. Now, I didn't want to go overboard here, so I just went with clean, basic boxes. As long as they would slide smoothly, I really didn't care how they went together, and since I'm limited on joinery options, I didn't want to blow one on building these drawers. So once those were done and fitted, it was finally time for the part that makes or breaks the whole build: the finish. And I'll be honest, this is the stage that makes me the most nervous every single time I do a project. Before staining, I preconditioned all of the wood. Pine can get blotchy really fast, and I didn't want to ruin this whole build because I rushed the prep, so I took my time with that part. Then I went in with dark walnut. Same stain that I used on the coffee table. Exact same can. And as soon as it started soaking in, I could tell something was wrong. It didn't match at all. It was brown, but it was not the right color of brown. It looked yellower, less warm. The coffee table has this subtle red tone in it, and these just looked brown, which made no sense because it's literally the same stain from the same can.
I think that this reclaimed wood that I've been using on these past couple projects is not actually pine, because the stain turns out completely differently when I put it on pine versus whatever this is. And I think it might be oak. You can see that color difference between the two stains very clearly. Even though it's the exact same stain, this one looks a little bit greener almost, whereas this one has that more rich, almost reddish hue to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring this piece inside my house and compare it to the coffee table so we don't end up with a completely unmatching set of tables here. And this is exactly what I was worried about. You can see how much less red, or kind of that warm brown tone, that this wood has than this wood. And this is the same reclaimed wood that our tabletops are made out of. I don't know what it would be. Like I said, it might be oak, but I figured a 4x6 would always be pine, just because that's, you know, cheaper for construction lumber. Now there is a small chance that if I just top coat this with polyurethane or something of the sort, it turns into this color, but I'm really not sure. I don't see that being likely. So the only option here is to run a test piece and see how the finish turns out before we finalize everything, which is going to set us back a day of our schedule, and that is a day that we don't have.
So instead of guessing, I grabbed a scrap piece and made a test board with 2 different stains on it. One was dark walnut, and one was dark walnut layered with red mahogany. I let it dry, lacquered it, and then compared it directly next to the coffee table.
All right, here is the comparison. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that that is dang near perfect. That is way better compared to this, which is a lot greener. This brings that reddish brown back into the fray. This is what we're going with, 100%.
And that is why a little bit of experimentation can go a long way, because if we had just plopped these things in there without checking the stain first, we would have been totally off the color and they wouldn't have looked right at all up against that coffee table. And since this is supposed to be a matching set, I gotta do everything I can to make them look like they actually match.
So once I knew what stain combination to use, I went back through and recoated everything with a layer of red mahogany, and it deepened the tone, warmed it up, and it looked exactly the same as the coffee table. Once the color was dried, I sprayed satin lacquer over both of the tables. And getting a lot more comfortable with my spray gun has been one of my goals this year, and I think it's coming out really awesome. I love spraying finish. It makes everything so much quicker, and it makes woodworking a whole lot more fun because you're not worrying about a perfect finish all the time. Once the first coat of lacquer was dry, I lightly sanded everything with 800 grit paper just to knock down any texture and dust nibs, then put a second coat of lacquer on, and that is when these pieces really came alive. It had that buttery smooth feel, not glossy, not matte, just soft, clean, like something you would actually want to touch when you walk by it. And for the first time in the build, I was actually thinking that I might make my deadline of Valentine's Day. So with the bases looking absolutely gorgeous, it was time to finish the tabletops. And this is where things started stressing me out a little bit. For the tops, I wanted something more durable than lacquer. These are side tables after all. They're going to have drinks on them, probably hot food, pizza boxes, so I went with polyurethane. But instead of brushing it on thick, I thinned it out with lacquer thinner so I could spray it and get a super smooth, even finish. And spraying it actually went great. It laid down nice, it self-leveled really well, it looked awesome. And then I waited, and waited, and waited. Even thinned, the polyurethane took forever to cure, especially over the knots in the wood. For some reason, those spots would not dry. It looked dry, it felt kinda dry, but if you pressed on it, you could still tell it wasn't fully cured yet. And I can't sand it until it's fully cured. Because the whole goal here is to sand that first coat with 400 grit paper and get a perfectly smooth surface before the final layer goes on, I waited almost 4 days. Which doesn't sound terrible unless you remember I'm on a 14-day deadline. And at this point, the time I have left is getting very thin. Once it was finally cured enough, I sanded everything down to 400 grit, just knocking it back enough to give the second coat something to bite into. And then I sprayed the final layer. And that one still took a full 24 hours to dry. So now, I only have 48 hours. 48 hours to install all the drawer slides, route out the slots for the hidden pulls, which by the way are leftovers from the bathroom vanity build that I did, attach the tabletops to the bases without scratching anything, and then get everything in the house and staged to show Alexis. And suddenly, this doesn't really feel like a relaxed Valentine's Day project anymore. It feels like I'm probably going to be assembling this at midnight on February 13th, hoping nothing goes wrong. This is it. 48 hours left. Everything is cured. Everything is finished. Now I just have to turn a pile of very delicate parts into 2 fully assembled tables. So I attached the tops to the bases, double-checked alignment, put the drawer slides in, which lined up thanks to a lot of careful measurement on my side before starting any of the assembly. And when I slid that first drawer in and it actually closed smoothly, that was a great moment because there's nothing worse than building a drawer for 2 weeks and then it sticks at the very end. And then, while testing the drawers, I noticed that one of the tables wobbled pretty badly. And honestly, I have no idea how this happened, because everything was square, everything was flat during assembly, but somehow once it was standing on the floor, one leg was just slightly off. And at this point, I do not have time to recut or rebuild anything. So I flipped it on its side, drilled out the bottoms of the legs, and installed some adjustable feet, which a lot of people are going to say this is a hack, but honestly, if this ever goes half on carpet, half on wood floor, I'm going to be very, very happy that these are on. So with that crisis avoided, both tables were fully assembled, drawers were working, and I took them inside. I staged the room a little bit, moved some things around, and cleaned up to make sure everything looked good. And then I waited for Alexis to get home.
Well, today is the perfect day. Alexis has been gone all day at her mom's house helping her out with some stuff over there, which means I finally had time to move everything into the living room and get rid of those old tables that we had. And since Alexis directly said that I had to build side tables after she saw the coffee table, this better be the best Valentine's Day present that she has ever gotten, and hopefully I'm not setting myself up to try and one-up myself every year from here on out, because this is gonna be really hard. I love these things. Hello?
What did you build me this time?
Why do you think I built you something?
Because the only reason you stand there ever is because you have something to surprise me with.
Okay. I did build you something.
Okay.
Tomorrow's Valentine's Day, right?
Yes.
And I wanted to get you something
Okay.
that would be really cool and that you've wanted for a really long time.
Okay.
So, see if you can notice what I did.
My side tables! They were perfect match.
Yeah. Well, so the tabletops on the side tables
Yeah.
are made of the same reclaimed wood that the tabletop from that came
Oh, I
from.
didn't realize that we had leftover stuff after you did that.
Yeah.
No, they look so good.
Do you remember when I showed you the coffee table and you were like, now you have to make me side tables?
Yes.
There you go. Happy
I love
Valentine's
them.
Day.
Oh, snack drawer.
No, not snack drawer. I mean, it could be a snack drawer.
Are they soft closing? Like
There are soft close. There are soft close, yeah. Well, yeah, there you go. You like it?
I do.
Happy Valentine's Day.